다음에 유쿠이 선생님께서 발표를 해주시겠고요. 홍콩대학교와 런던 골드스미스에서 컴퓨터공학과 철학을 공부를 하셨죠. 그래서 지금은 독일의 바우하우스 대학교에서 좀 가르치고 계시고요. 지금 중국 광저우에 있는 중국 미술학원의 초빙 교수이자 심엉동 국제연구센터의 멤버이기도 하시고요. 메타필로소피, 현상학 연구, 인게리키 같은 저널의 기술 철학과 매체 철학에 관한 논문을 발표해 오셨습니다. 디지털 대상의 실체에 대해서 중국의 기술에 관한 질문과 같은 저서를 지으셨습니다. 역시 이번에도 미리 저희가 영상을 받아서 좀 자막을 같이 준비를 해봤습니다. 이에 대해서 이승현 선생님께서 질의를 해주시겠고요. 이승현 선생님은 서울대학교에서 국제경제학을 공부하신 후 약 10여 년 동안 금융 및 금융 컨설팅 분야에서 활동을 하셨습니다. 그리고 나서 미술사학 공부를 시작을 하셨고요. 그리고 홍익대학교에서 박사학위를 받으셨습니다. 그리고 최근에 굉장히 많은 전시를 기획하고 계신데요. 현재 그 세화예술문화재단 이사이시면서도 아트플랜트 아시아의 총감독을 맡고 계십니다. 사회신용, 눈의 폄하와 같은 저서를 또 옮기기도 하셨고요. 그래서 이승현 선생님의 그 질의에 대한 이코이 선생님의 대답은 역시 쉬는 시간 갖고 나서 다 한꺼번에 진행을 하도록 하겠습니다. 자, 그러면은 이코이 선생님의 발제 코스모테크닉스 역사 비평을 향해를 듣도록 하겠습니다.
So, it's my great pleasure to participate in this event, Chronicle of Everything. So, let me go straight to my presentation. My talk is titled For Cosmotechnical Critique of History. And I'm going to explain why it is a cosmotechnical critique of history relevant to our discussion today regarding the question of coexistence, but also more specifically around the question of chronicle. What does it mean by chronicle? Chronicle means a written record of historical event, a record of events in the order in which they happened, or to make a record or give details of something. That is the explanation, the definition we could find in the Cambridge English Dictionary. So the key question is not about writing, but rather about how the history of everything is written, and how the writing of history is going to determine not only what this thing is, but also its future. Today we are confronting a big question, a big problem, or even you can say one of the huge crises of human history, which has to do with the theme of this symposium: coexistence with other species. Instead of talking directly about the species, I would like to enter this topic through the question of technology, because it seems to me that the whole process of modernization that we have in the past 100 years has led to this moment, led to this start, led to this understanding that the current mode of industrialization and the current form of living are no longer sustainable. And I would like to explain this. I would like to explain or try to approach this question by arguing that before we try to write the chronicle of everything, let's try to focus more specifically on the question of technology. In the following slides, I'm going to show two images or two maybe we can say chronicles, of the development of technology. One is about development technology, the other is also about development of technology, but more specifically the formation of what is known today as the Anthropocene. In this picture, you will see how the evolution of computational technologies, that they are moving towards what is called technological singularity. What does it mean by technological singularity? To put it in simple words, it is the moment when the artificial intelligence or the computer is able to reflect on itself. That means it has consciousness. It has intelligence, which allows it to go back to itself. And with all different intelligence combining together, that it may produce a technological singularity, which has another name called intelligence explosion. So the history of technological development or history of artificial intelligence moves towards this endpoint, we call technological singularity. In an essay, and very interestingly, Henry Kissinger, and I think everyone knows who he is, in 2018 has published an article titled How the Enlightenment Ends, where Henry Kissinger basically argued that the rise of machine intelligence has put enlightenment, the age of reason, to an end. The end of enlightenment, or the explosion of intelligence, technological singularity, has a lot to association with what is now called mass unemployment, or the surveillance society, and so on and so forth. And it is this movement, in general, you can see that this technological progress seems to be more and more determined our contemporary society, but also our historical progress. As you know, that all different countries, China, Russia, USA, and including Korea, are competing towards the technological singularity because it is the background, it's the battlefield of competition. Now I would like to show you another picture, another history, which is the history of the Anthropocene. And you can see that from 1750 on, and 1750 means what? Technological revolution, industrial revolution. The industrial revolution took place from the second half of the 18th century, and it arrived today at what is called the Anthropocene, which means that the human activities are affecting the geochemical activities of the earth. That means the human species become the most powerful and determinant species on the earth. Now, related to this, to the Anthropocene, is ecological crisis, global warming, and even worse, the sixth mass extinction. As you can see, that how many species have disappeared in the past years due to the man-made activities and product. Now, this is how history, that we show two chronicles of technology. One is the movements towards technological singularity. The other is the Anthropocene. But I would like you to pay attention to notice of the similarity between these two graphs. As you can see, that there is an exponential growth for technological singularity as well as for the Anthropocene. What does it mean by this? What does it mean by this similarity? It is because either, the formation of the Anthropocene is a much longer history from in the past 250 years. Of course, some historian may want to chase it even earlier to the beginning of human history of agriculture, or even the beginning of colonization. But let's take it as the Industrial Revolution as a critical moment, as a critical point for the formation of the Anthropocene. And then we have the shorter version, in a shorter time frame, in the case of technological singularity. But all of this means precisely a technological acceleration towards an end point. For the technological singularity, it is the intelligence explosion, the control of machines. Either this is a myth or not, that's another question. And secondly, for the second case, the Anthropocene, the end of the human, the end of species, we are not sure if it will be the end of the Earth. Probably not, because human being is only a tiny part of nature. But concerning these two processes and the similarity between these two graphs, we can say that, in fact, they reflect a process that we said at the very beginning, modernization. I want to show you this graph, another way of describing this graph, as a brief chronicle. Or here we can say the chronicle of history, the chronicle of historical time. In this picture, what you can see is all these curves means histories, different histories. Where you can say history of Korea, history of China, history of Asia, history of the USA, history of Latin America. And we can see that this historical time, this diverse historical time, was synchronized by technology moving towards what I called a global time axis. So the global time axis synchronized all historical time moving towards one endpoint, be it intelligence explosion or the homo deus, as some popular historian wanted to say. So in this picture, you will see that modernization is a synchronization of all different histories towards one endpoint. And here I would like to make a distinction between what is known as modernity and modernization. Modernity, for me, means the methodological and epistemological rupture which took place in the 16th and 17th century in Europe. Modernization means the universalization of a particular form of knowledge and technology, starting from Europe and propagated throughout the world. And it is also a process of synchronization by bringing different historical time towards an endpoint, which we call apocalypse. It's a very religious notion. And what we are witnessing today, and the different warnings that we have received from the coronavirus and other kind of disasters, is that what is in danger is first of all biodiversity, the rapid decrease of species, which has to do with the disappearance of the Amazon rainforest, the burning of the forests in Australia, and the pollution of the ocean, for example. But also new diversity. New diversity, the word new, N-O-O, comes from the Greek word nous, N-O-U-S, which means thinking. Technology has determined, technology as the first productive force, has also eliminate the diversity of thinking and imagination concerning the progress of history and the future of mankind. In response to this question, the anthropologist, and here I refer specifically to an important symposium which took place in 2015, How to Think the Anthropocene, organized at the Collège de France in Paris by anthropologists and ecologists, for example, Philippe Descola, who wanted to think from the perspective of anthropology how the modern epistemology has dominated the development, economical, technological, social, political, since the European modernity. And how can we reflect on the current situation and to reopen the question of plurality, which is to say, a new diversity. The Brazilian anthropologist Eduardo Vieiras da Castro described what he called a Meridian Perspectivism. In addition to Philippe Descola, has four ontologies. So Descola has four ontologies: naturalism, which for him means the opposition between nature and culture, coming out from the European modernity; animism, analogism, totemism, which you can find in what they call the other cultures. And on top of that, Eduardo Vieiras Castro added what he called perspectivism, the exchange of perspective between human and animal, that the animal may see the human as an animal and see itself as human. Now all this means for Vieiras da Castro what he called multinaturalism, which means that we have one culture but multiple natures, in contradistinction to what is now known as multiculturalism, one nature, multiple culture, that one nature is exploited by multiple culture. Now what they propose to go back to is a multinaturalism, that there are different ways of living with other species, and there are different relations between human and non-humans. Now we are not saying that going back to these ancient or non-modern ontologies is necessarily better than the modern ones, but rather to show that there is a pluralism which has been closed in the past 100 years. Now for me, I think that this way of raising question is very inspiring. But for me, there is a limit. The limit is that it doesn't address directly the question of technology. And for me, I believe that in order to maintain biodiversity and technodiversity, we must first of all reflect on what I call technodiversity. What does it mean by technodiversity? It means that we have different practice, different imagination, and different conception, different use of technologies. And I want to show you the other image, which is what I call fragmentation. What does it mean by fragmentation? As you can see from this picture, that the different historical time, when they're on the point of converging towards the end point, they reopen again. They diverge. The divergence of different historical time. And this divergence of different historical time without converging towards an end point, should it be called absolute or apocalypse? It's not our discussion here. But rather, this idea, this proposal to reopen the historical time and also to maintain or even to promote biodiversity and technodiversity has to be sustained with the notion of technodiversity. However, in the past 100 years, we have been told that technology is universal. There is a certain logic of historical progress, and this historical progress more and more coincident with technological development. Now, it's only in this century that we see how close it is. In the time of Hegel, it was different because it was the spirit. Now, the spirit is externalized and realized on machines, and that is taking a kind of dialectical turn. But we can leave the question of Hegel maybe during the discussion. I just wanted to add here to explain a little bit more what I mean by multiple cosmotechnics or technodiversity. Is that because we have been told in philosophy of technology, anthropology of technology, and history of technology that technology is universal. That there is a universal logic that determines the progress of technology. And we can say that the Chinese technology, was behind before the 16th century was more advanced than European ones, and after the 16th century it was behind. We talk as if we are talking about the same thing. We are comparing, the advancements of one thing over the other in different regions. But here I wanted to propose what is called an antinomy, what I call the antinomy of the universality of technology. So what does it mean by? Here I would like to read it out, thesis. An antinomy is characterized by a thesis and an antithesis. When you separate the thesis and antithesis, each of them looks correct. But when you put both together, then you see the contradiction. Now here comes the thesis. Technology is an anthropological universal understood as the externalization of memory and liberation of bodily organs. And this is the proposal from anthropologists of technology as well as some philosophers. Antithesis. Technology is not anthropological universal. It is enabled and constrained by particular cosmologies which go beyond functionalities and utilities. And here I wanted to explain a little bit more what I mean by particular cosmologies. That is what I call cosmotechnics. Because for me, cosmology as a theoretical knowledge does not exist. The cosmology is always already embedded in the way of life, in the form of life. And cosmology embeds already different set of relations between human and non-humans, different ways of knowing, different way of behaving. So for example, Chinese medicine is a cosmotechnics. And it is different from Western medicine. But this does not mean that it is wrong, because Chinese medicine as as empirical science has already existed for 1,000 years and it has been proved to be effective, even though it has completely different epistemology than Western medicine. If you ask a Chinese medical doctor to explain, to show it to you, yin and yang, or qi, energy, no one is able to show it. But this doesn't mean that it is not scientific. So we have to take scientific in a different way. So what I propose is that in the past 100 years, we focus on the thesis, we focus on the universal part of technology. And that we believe that technology is universal and there is a rationality that all technologies have to comply to. But I wanted to say that the question of technology has been repressed, not only in Europe, but also in Asia for many years. And in view of the current situation, the Anthropocene, but also the ecological crisis that we have now, I propose to reopen the question of cosmotechnics, to formulate and reconstruct histories of cosmotechnics, and to reflect on if it is possible to allow us to transform the current technologies which is leading us nowhere. I am trying to deal with this question in the book called The Question Concerning Technology in China, an essay on cosmotechnics, which is already translated into Korean. In which I also attempt to answer the question by Joseph Neher, why modern science and technology didn't develop in Chinese civilization or in India, but only in the West. Because I believe that what Neher was hinting is that there were actually different kinds of technologies, and we cannot compare the Western technology directly with Eastern technology as if they are the same thing. But what are these differences? What can this difference tell us today? I think we have to take this question seriously and to reformulate what I call techno-diversity if we want to maintain both biodiversity and new diversity, also to imagine different ways of coexistence. So here are some other materials or some other writings where I discuss this question. So I leave here, and I'm sure that there are many questions, but I hope that we have the chance to discuss. Thank you very much for your attention.
네, 저는 10월 8일 국내 세미나에서 유쿠이 선생님이 말씀하신 삶의 방식으로서의 코스모테크닉스, 그러니까 동북아 코스테크닉스를 이용해서 1970년대 한국 미술의 차이를 설명하고자 하는 내용을 다룬 적이 있었습니다. 중국에서의 기술에 대한 물음이라는 책은 지난 봄에 출판이 되었었고요. 사실 올해 5월 달에 아트 앤 코스모테크닉스라고 하는 책이 출간 예정이라고 아마존에 이렇게 나왔었는데, 영국이 그 팬데믹이 워낙 상황이 심각해지면서 계속 출간이 미뤄지고 있는 것 같습니다. 굉장히 출간이 기대되고 있습니다. 제 질의는 일단 오늘 발표의 상당 부분이 이미 번역이 되어 있는 중국에서의 기술에 대한 물음을 통해서 소개된 내용이었는데요. 그럼에도 불구하고 직접 이렇게 그 영상으로 보니까 훨씬 이해가 잘 되고 그랬던 것 같습니다. 말씀하신 내용은 인류가 당면한 오늘날의 위기에 대해서 한편으로는 사물의 역사를 기술 발달의 역사로 읽고, 다른 한편으로는 인류의 형성의 역사로 읽고 계신데요. 기술 발달이 기술적 특이성 혹은 지능 폭발로 향하고, 동시에 기술 발달의 가속화에 의해서 유발된 인류세가 인류의 종말을 가져올 것이라고 말합니다. 또한 15세기에서 17세기 유럽에서 시작한 특정 형식의 지식 내지는 기술의 보편화를 유발한 근대화가 그 기술에 의해서 상이한 각각의 나라의 역사를 단일한 글로벌 시간축에 수렴시켰으므로 이 위기에 대처하기 위해서 유크이 선생은 보편화된 기술에 대한 사유를 다시금 다원화할 것을 요청하고 계십니다. 최근 데스콜라, 미베이루스 데 카스트로 등의 인류학자들이 소위 존재론적 전의 논의는 자연과 문화의 대립으로 정의되는 근대의 산물인 자연주의의 이의를 제기하면서 다양한 자연의 존재를 주장합니다. 그러나 자연에 대한 토착의 존재론이나 개념으로 회귀하는 것은 이미 서구 기술에 의해서 지배되어 있는 테크노스피어가 이미 바이오스피어를 대체한 인류세의 상황에서는 명백한 한계가 있습니다. 유크이 선생은 과학적 기술적 사유는 인간의 삶의 방식에 내장되어 있는 우주론과 연결되어 있다는 기술에 대한 이해 방식을 코스모테크닉스라고 정의하면서 코스모테크닉스의 질문이 다시 제기되어야 한다고 주장하셨습니다. 무엇보다 현 인류가 당면한 문제를 기술의 문제로 사유하는 것, 그리고 문제 해결을 위해서 중국, 즉 동북아의 전통 사유를 비롯한 각 지역 고유의 사유를 소환하는 점이 특히 인상적이었고요. 이제 발표 내용과 관련돼서 두 가지 질문을 드리고자 합니다. 첫 번째는 아주 간단한 건데요. Technical Singularity 또는 Intelligence Explosion이라고 부르는 현상에 대해서 조금 더 부연 설명을 듣고자 합니다. 그것이 오늘날 인공지능에 대해서 우리가 가지는 우려, 즉 인간의 통제를 벗어나서 스스로 사고하는 기계를 의미하는 것인지 그 부분에 좀 보완 설명을 부탁드리고요. 두 번째 질문은 선생님은 기술 물음이 수반된 코스모테크닉스의 사유라는 요청에 관해서 묻고자 하십니다. 당신은 중국에서의 기술에 대한 물음에서 자본주의는 지구를 지배하는 우리 시대의 코스모테크닉스이다 라고 밝히고 계시는데요. 그러면서 자본주의의 실용적인 이성이 코스모테크닉스라는 보다 심오한 질문을 맡고 있다고 말하고 있습니다. 저는 오늘날 기술 물음이 중요하다는 사실을 수긍합니다. 그러나 문제는 그 기술 자체가 아니라 이를 어떻게 사용할 것인가라는 도덕적, 정치적, 경제적 조건이 아닐까라는 생각이 여전히 듭니다. 중국의 의술은 확실히 중국의 우주론에 기초한 서구와는 차별화된 기술의 아주 좋은 사례라고 생각하는데 한국의 경우에 중국 의학은 서구 의학이 점령한 오늘날 의료 체계하에서 그 영역이 크게 제한되고 있습니다. 기술의 우열이 아니라 기술을 둘러싼 이해관계가 기술을 채택하고 있습니다. 따라서 선생님이 주장해서 기술이 우선하는 것인지 아니면 코스모테크닉스가 우선하는지, 즉 기술의 문제와 자본주의의 문제 어느 것이 우선인지에 대해서 묻고자 합니다.
Right. So, because of the last minute's organization, so I'm not able to respond to your questions live. But I would like to respond to the wonderful questions raised by Li Xiong-yun concerning my lecture for Cosmo-Technical Critique of History. Now, you raised three questions, and I'm trying to see how I can respond to that. The first question concerns technological singularity. You asked me to explain what is technological singularity. And as you know, the technological singularity is more or less, we can say, a Silicon Valley ideology proposed by people like Ray Kurzweil. What is technological singularity? It means that this idea is about an idea of the development of artificial intelligence or computation in general, and it holds the view there are certain points in the development of AI that the AI is able to reflect on itself. When you say to reflect on oneself, it means the development of consciousness. So I am talking, but the fact that I am able to be aware of what I'm talking, and at the same time to put what I'm saying into question. This is a form of consciousness. So, according to the promoters, evangelists of technological singularity, at the moment that the computer or the machine is able to reflect on itself, then it produces a huge amount of intelligence. Only if we put all the intelligence of machines together, then it's possible to create what is called a super intelligence. And the super intelligence is able to do all the plannings, social, political, economic plannings. So this is a kind of transhumanist vision of the developments of technology. And this vision of technological singularity is a problem for me. It's a problem because I think that the technological singularity is a speculation of the development of technology or the convergence of technology towards an endpoint. And this endpoint, we don't know what it is. We don't know what will happen after this endpoint. And it is called technological singularity. You can also give it a theological meaning, for example, apocalypse. It is against this vision that I propose to reopen the question of technology. And this also now we come to your second question regarding cossmotechnics. Now my definition of cossmotechnics, the basic definition of cossmotechnics, is the unification between the moral and the cosmos, or the unification of the moral order and the cosmic order through technical activities. So it is through technology and that the moral and the cosmos and the cosmic are unified. This is my basic or preliminary definition of cossmotechnics. So there is no chronicle order saying that cossmotechnics is the first of technology. It is one theoretical foundation that I have laid down, which claims that all technologies are cossmotechnics. And in these cossmotechnics, we see the different dynamics and process in this process in what is called unification between the moral and the cosmos, the different dynamics. So this is what I call cossmotechnics. But to explain it in a more concrete example that you mentioned about traditional medicine. Now let's look into Chinese medicine. The Chinese medicine basically reused the vocabularies of Chinese cosmology. We can talk about yin and yang, we talk about qi, we talk about shen, for example. These are beings, or these are a kind of existence that we are not able to demonstrate. Let's say if a Chinese doctor is asked by a Western doctor, please show me qi. Now a Western doctor is able to demonstrate, for example, through anatomy, blood vessels and so on, but how can you demonstrate qi? It's not possible. However, as an epistemology, it doesn't mean that it's wrong, because it's empirical science which we have been practicing for thousands of years. So Chinese medicine is for me a very good example to explain cosmotechnics. The relation between the human body and its environment, as well as the kind of microcosm, the body as microcosm. But in the Western medicine, especially modern medicine, is very different. The dynamic is very different. The way we understand the body is no longer about cosmology, maybe you can say more about closer to astrophysics. Not the same, but in terms of the spirit, the scientific spirit. So they're different. They have been different cosmotechnics, and this also leads to the third question, that where you also mentioned about Descola and the anthropologist Philippe Descola, and Philippe Descola trying to say that the division, the opposition between culture and nature is a kind of naturalism. He called it naturalism. And this naturalism is a product of European modernity. So, the capitalism or the kind of cosmotechnics that is within capitalism today is based on this epistemological assumption, for example, and which is very different from, for example, the ancient Korean technology, ancient Chinese technology. Now, I would like to say to respond in 2 points. The first point is that I wanted to come back to the definition of cosmotechnics, in which I define cosmotechnics as the unification between the moral order and cosmic order. So, in fact, in the cosmotechnic, there is already the value of the moral, or moral values. The invention of technology, the use of technology, already embed the moral order, for example, and also deontology, if we can say so. So, the question is not to separate the political and the moral from technology as if technology is neutral. No, already in technology, in its the invention, in its use, and its development, is already embed a complex set of values. Should that be moral or political, as you said? So, the second point I want to make is that if we think of, on the one hand, the moral and the political, or like moral, ethical, so on, and technology on the other side, then we are just repeating a kind of Cartesian dualism. So on the one hand, we have our mind or the heart, especially in the Eastern tradition. In the Eastern tradition, Asian thinking, for example, in Korea, in Japan, in China, people talk about the heart, Shin, Kokoro, for example. People talk about the heart, and but I think that it is a mistake today that we repeat this Cartesian dualism. As you know, after the Opium Wars, that China, there was a self-strengthening movement in China after the defeat in the Opium Wars, and that is it had a slogan which is to use which understand Chinese thought as the mind and Western technology as the instrument. But this was a failure, because this dualism does not last, couldn't last. So the question is not to separate technology and the moral, but rather we need to think technology also already together with the question of the moral. And this is the reason for which I said that we need to go back to the question of cosmotechnics and to what I call techno-diversity. Now we can go further into this, but I think we don't really have much time. But the last thing I would like to emphasize is that the idea of multiple cosmotechnics or techno-diversity is a proposal to break away from this dominant way of understanding of modern technology, the kind of calculability and rationality which is now the only option, seems to be the only option for us, because we always said, we tend to think that technology is something objective, rational, universal. But this is exactly what I try to problematize. And in order to ask, is it possible for us to think by going back to history, and also to imagine, to project into the future the possibility of techno-diversity? So I think I'll stop here. So thank you again very much for your questions.
네, 저는 요즘에 좀 몸이 안 좋아서 좀 침을 맞고 있는데요. 어떻게 보면 지금 질문해 주신 바가 제가 가지고 있는 아주 실질적인 문제와도 연결이 되는 것 같기도 합니다. 실손보험으로 침술이 처리가 되지 않아서 매우 당혹스러운데 이 기술의 보편적인 측면을 넘어서서 어떤 기술의 어떤 다양성에 대한 인지가 우리 생활 깊숙이 조금 더 들어왔으면 좋겠다라는 생각을 하게 되고요.